Hey folks, thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. This is episode 29 with my very special guest, Jay Berndt. Jay Berndt is a legendary local musician. Some of you may know him best as the singer of the band Kilgore, which sounds like this. This is Run with the Hunted off of their latest release from 2018, Someday This War Is Going to End. From what I saw, that album is still available on their website. It's a limited edition colored vinyl as well. So, pretty hot. You can check that out if you'd like. Some of you may also know Jay, possibly from his other band called Jay Berndt and the Orphans, which sounds like this. That was California, Here I Come, off of the 2018 release, Life, Love, and Loss. Great musician, very wide and varied styles of music that he covered. We get into it in our discussion as far as, like, you know, what other bands he's been part of and possibly where you'll be able to find those in the not-too-distant future. So I'm not going to give that away right here, but stay tuned for that. He's a great musician, completely wonderful to speak with, had a great time. We discussed Black Flag's Damaged, their debut full-length record from 1980. Jay is a huge fan. It's very evident when you listen to or watch this. That reminds me, I had one problem when we were recording this. Doing the remote thing is a little bit of a drag for me. It's a little hard for me to kind of keep all the plates spinning. So my camera went out near the end of the interview, so the video lost about maybe 20 minutes of footage. Basically, the video is a little shorter than the audio stream. The audio stream is virtually the entire conversation, minus, a few things that I cut here and there. So two slightly different versions of the conversation. I encourage you to watch the video because Jay is very animated and he's like just very energetic and jazzed to talk about this, and I could grasp that so clearly, and I had a great time speaking with him through the video chat. The audio stream is also very good because it's good sound quality, and I like that too. So whatever pleases you. Do whichever you like. So I hope you enjoy the show. I told you last time, if you have listened to the last episode, that the last two episodes I've been mentioning the shirts. Here we go. I got shirts. I got men's Psychic Static shirts. I love these. I mean, I'm very happy with these personally. I mean, I think that they came out great. That's men's Army Green. I got it in white, which is also very striking. It actually kind of looks like the website. And men's Vinyl and Vision shirts too. I got a soft cream, which is also got a branding on the back of the Psychic Static logo, if you can see that. I got the men's olive. It's a dark olive also. Same design, also branded on the back there. And I do have them in women's. Different style cut. I also have those in a vintage white for ladies for Vinyl and Vision, and then also ladies Psychic Static tees as well. So if you want to visit our website and grab one of those, I would appreciate it. Go ahead and take a look. There'll be all the different sizes and different varieties that we have, the different colors and the different designs. We're sticking with the Psychic Static and the Vinyl and Vision. There's one other shirt that's coming out that I don't want to mention right here, right now. I'm just going to leave it on the website. I'll mention something about it. I just don't want to mention it right here. It could possibly be a lot to talk about. So, without further ado, let's get to the show. Please do all the things you do with the internet. Like, share, comment, whatever you do, man. We love it. Thank you so much. Enjoy. I just want to say hi and thank you for doing this. You look great.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you.
for coming on and talking.
Yeah, absolutely, man. The pedigree of everybody you've had on, I'm like, I know all those people. They're all great people. I watched like three or four of them, and I was like, hey, this is cool. I definitely want to do this.
Cool, man. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, actually, so I've been doing a little research about you. I've been looking into your bands.
Cool.
I've always known the name, for
Mm,
sure. Like all of your band's names, I've at least heard if I have not seen them or heard them.
that's cool.
But so doing the research now again, like so much later after some of those things have happened, like Kilgore and the Revival Preachers,
Yeah,
especially. I watched some of your Revival Preachers videos, and Damien's in the band. I didn't realize he was in the band,
yeah.
and he
That
is
was
amazing.
He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
The Preachers were like the first band I actually like played guitar and sang in. And I'd never really done it before. There was another band I did briefly before that, but like playing with Damien was like a huge education. The dude's just a monster guitar player,
I know.
and when we first got together, it was like we sat down. Dave Sasquatch, Dave Cacciano, recommended Damien because I was looking to put together a country band, and
Hmm.
he was like, "Dude, you and Damien are going to be like peas and carrots. You just get together." So we got together at the Coffee Exchange, and I think we talked for like 3 hours. Like we just like the Kinks, the Beatles, the Who, like just the Stooges. We just so it was like, all right, yeah, this is meant to be that we're going to be in a band together. But
Yeah.
I learned so much from being in a band with him, and vice versa. I hope. But we're still friends to this day.
Hmm.
We text each other like every couple of weeks kind of thing, and it's usually like a Cheech and Chong quote, or like some random kind of thing, and we just laugh about it and
Yeah.
start talking about music again, because that's what we do. So,
Yeah, he's a huge music fan. I mean,
huge.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, he's just a wealth of knowledge too at that. So
yeah, big time.
that's cool, man. Well, I'm glad
Yeah,
to see that. I mean, like, yeah, I watched a video of you guys playing, and I was just like, he fucking makes it look so easy, and
it's
it's just like,
effortless. Yeah,
I know, and he's just like
yeah,
doing all these crazy solos. I was telling my wife Jess last night as we were watching it, and I was like, look at him, look what he's doing. She's just like,
yeah,
I don't know. What do you talk? Like, she doesn't know how to play any instruments. I was just
yeah.
like, he just bent that note, but he didn't bend it on the string. He bent it like, down past the nut. And she's just like,
It,
is that impressive? I was like, yeah, kinda.
oh, oh yeah. Like every single guitar nerd that I know, that when we would play, they'd just be watching him. And I've played with some really, really, really great dudes, whether it's Dennis Kelly or Greg Burgess and whatnot. And every single
Mhm.
one, and those guys are no slouches as well. They would just sit there and watch Damien and be like, damn, yep,
Right.
he's the man. He's awesome.
For sure.
And it's no dig on what he does in
That's what I
the
thought.
teenagers, because I love what he does in the teenagers, but he kind of doesn't play that way anymore. Like he doesn't do like those like like
Right.
gnarly solos
Right.
like he was doing with us and the Preachers. I don't know, maybe he got burned out on it or something.
I just think I think that's what it calls for. Like
Yeah,
the style of music that the Revival Preachers was playing, like that style of guitar playing is what you need.
absolutely.
But
I was
like,
like,
yeah,
easily it'd be like, all right, we're gonna do 16 bars here, and then you just go, and I'll nod to you when we come back into the verse. Cool, man, let's go. And that was like half the covers that we did, and we did some really good covers.
hmm.
And he was the only guy. We did this crazy show in 2009. We had this idea of we're going to cover the entire Ziggy Stardust album. That's what we're going to do. We're just going
Oh,
to do it, and we did it. We did it at the Blackstone, and he pulled off all of those Ronson parts like they, like he wrote them. It was insane. It was
yeah,
insane. Dude is just a monster. Yeah.
that's great, man. I wish I could have seen that. I didn't even hear about it.
Yeah, you know what? I have a couple of videos that like right now I'm like in archival mode because there's just so much stuff over the years that when you're in a band, I know you're a musician as well, so it's like,
Yeah,
when you're in a band, you're just constantly going. You're not thinking about the past, you're thinking about the next stuff that you're working on. And I had so many bands in successions over the years that I never really got a chance to go, oh, I got to get that, out, and also a lot of these bands were like in the early 2000s where there were no digital streaming, none of that stuff existed. So either you bought the CD and you had the CD or you didn't, and it didn't exist any longer. It was, no longer in the ether. So
right.
now I'm kind of like, dude, none of the Preacher CDs, you can't get them anywhere.
No,
It
you
doesn't
can't.
exist.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm working on now. Is, you know, I've got a couple of live albums by the Preachers nobody's ever heard. We have an entire electric album that nobody's heard.
Oh
You know,
wow.
so I'm remixing and remastering a ton of stuff right now.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, it's fun. It's
Yeah,
cool.
you're in your studio now.
Yeah, yeah. This is my
Moto
little
Destructo, is it?
Yeah, Moto Destructo. I
Cool.
needed a name for it, especially once I started, like, you know, producing artists, because it really started from the first real kind of stuff I produced was like the Preachers, and you know, some local bands would hear what we had done and like, dude, that sounds cool. Can we, you know, record at your place? Yeah, sure, man. What's it called? You know, so you have to come up with a name because it's just, you know, my home studio and whatnot. But I've got a lot of gear. I got a lot of microphones, and you
Right.
know, I feel like I, you know my way around, you know, engineering and whatnot. So
Yeah,
got a
yeah.
sound.
And you also have 1 inch tape that you record on, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
you're an analog purist, it seems, right?
Well, I was for the longest time,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
but recording on tape is a pain in the ass, dude. It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, I love it. It's fantastic. You know, I got a half-inch 8-track deck right here, and the 16-track 1 inch is in the other room. But it's, you know, alignment, finding parts for it. Tape is really expensive.
Constant maintenance too, right?
It's constant maintenance, you know, and for the longest time, digital recording just didn't sound good. Your best option for a long time was ADAT, and they sounded horrible. And you know, now with Pro Tools and the converters that are out there, they're just so good that you kind of go, all right, you know, I'd rather record on tape, but the convenience of Pro Tools is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. So you've done it. You've made the switch.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. I made the switch probably at least 5 years ago. Probably, yeah, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Cool,
yeah.
man.
Got some
Well,
great universal audio converters. That's the stuff I love. Their plugins. We My best friend producer, Michael DiBiase, who did the last Orphans record and the last Kilgore record. We did A/B comparisons to real Neve consoles versus the Neve plugins that, you know, like the Universal Audio stuff has, and it's spot on. You know, you bring
yeah.
any engineer in, they're like, dude, that's pretty fantastic. So
Right. Well,
mm,
that's cool, man. I mean, I've
yeah,
I've always been a purist myself. Like, I've always felt like I think I saw an interview with you saying how, or I read it probably somewhere that you kind of feel like you're cheating it, like if you're doing digital because you can take so many takes. Like it's like when you're using
it's true.
tape, you have to get it on the tape.
Yeah.
If you make a flub, then it's no good and you got to redo
It's
it.
no good. You got to do it over again. And
Right.
honestly, those are my favorite way to record. I much prefer to do it that way. The first Kilgore demos that we made in '93, we recorded 10 songs, overdubbed guitar solos, and overdubbed the vocals in 12 hours, and mixed it in 12 hours. I mean,
Whoa.
that's insane. That's like
Yeah.
Black Sabbath, like, you know, first album, you know, just banging it all out in one day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you
I
go, and
think they
this
did
is,
8 hours. I think.
yeah, they did it in 8 hours, and you go, that's insane. You know, I prefer to do it that way, but you end up going down this rabbit hole of perfection. Well, we can get the guitar sound so much better if we isolate the cabinet. And blah, 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 blah. You know, and
Right.
then all, you know, all the giant studios aren't really around any longer, which is, you know,
Hmm.
you don't have the luxury of being able to do like really fantastic drums in large rooms. You don't always have to, but you know, sometimes the music dictates, you know, certain rooms for certain sounds. So
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with working with what you've got. I mean, it seems like you obviously take enough pride in what you're doing in the first place that it doesn't even really matter like where you record it, because sometimes the performance is really all you need.
that's it. You really just
Um,
need a good song.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, you need really just a good idea and a good melody, and you know, quite honestly, that's the mentality that I've kind of, you know, ever since I started, you know, doing outside of metal and whatnot. That, you know, my own songwriting, that really has just been the focus, is coming up with a good melody.
right.
Half the stuff I do, it's while I'm walking the dogs. You know, I'm walking the dogs and I'm just kind of bopping along, and then a melody kind of like, you know, something comes in the head, and you go, you don't even know what the chord structure is, but you just go, man, that sounds really, really cool. I'll
Yeah,
come down, pick up the guitar, and kind of, oh, that's the wrong chords. Okay, you know,
right.
but if the melody sticks, that's you know, that's the most important thing.
Hmm. That leads me to ask you about. So you made the switch over to digital. What do you do to demo? Because you don't obviously like go into your studio just to demo things, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
even have like just a little handheld recorder thing, or
I got a handheld recorder, but I'm like, well, I got all this shit. This stuff, this stuff sounds so much better, you know.
right?
So yeah, like the thing that Mike Lopes, the drummer of the Orphans, I would do everything. I'd play the bass, I'd play the drums, do everything, and then here you go, guys. They'd be like, well, is this done? Like like you already did it. Like why do we got to re-record it again? That sounds awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it's not a band. It's just me. So put it out that way. It sounds fantastic. It's like,
Right.
well, but yeah, that's just the kind of way I work. I've kind of done that for a lot of years now. So
We were talking about the studio thing, recording.
mm,
Um, what did you say? It led me to think about this record you chose,
mm,
Black Flag's Damaged.
yeah.
Um, Now this album's not like a very sonic record. Let's say
Oh
it's
no.
a stripped down raw. It's just about as raw as you can get.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like most of the SST catalog,
Yeah.
I mean, all of those bands that come from SST are amazing. Um, so what is it about this record for you?
Oh, man, like I just got chills like thinking about it. Like literally, uh, it's like with any record, like I finally did the high fidelity thing that all of us think about doing, but I sat down last year and I came up with my 100 albums of all time,
Oh,
like
jeez.
literally, because it went from 10, then it was like 20, then it went 50, and I'm like, no, let me do 100. And I finally came up with it, and every single record on that list played a pivotal like moment in my life, and I can remember all these little details about the first time I heard that recording, or
Mm.
whatever it may be. But really, it started. I'm a Providence guy, but I lived in California for a number of years. My parents brought us out there when I was like 10 years old. And I didn't have any friends, like zero friends, because I was the very, very tall, skinny, geeky guy with the really thick Rhode Island accent. And all those kids were like in town and country surf shirts and like
Yeah.
shorts and blonde hair and blue eyes. Very much related to the Karate Kid movie, like very much related to it,
Oh
because
yeah.
it was really that. Like I got bullied a lot.
Oh.
So I retreated into music. Like it wasn't until I was about 10 years old. Like everything before that, I listened to music. I listened to my father's music. His 45 collection, the Coasters, the Drifters, Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, whatever it may
Mm.
be, Ray Charles. Um, and I loved all that stuff, but it wasn't like I was actively listening. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like where it speaks to you.
Hmm.
And the Beatles were like really the first band that spoke to me, but that was like my parents' music.
Right.
But it's like they felt like dreams, like because I'd heard those songs so many times when I was a kid. But when I was 10 years old, it finally was like, oh, you're like, you just kind of waking up from something, and it really spoke to me.
Mm.
But I had a friend in Rhode Island named Andy Joseph, and he and I shared like a lot of things together. Like we loved James Bond films. We loved skateboarding. We loved music. We shared music with each other all the time, and we loved the Three Stooges. And my grandparents would fly me back to Rhode Island in the summers so I could hang out with my friends and hang out with my grandparents, because I didn't have any friends. I was doing horrible in school. Blah blah blah.
Mm.
So my buddy Andy, he one of these trips he'd come. I was spending the night at his house, and he came over and he was like, "Dude, I got this videotape. We're into skateboarding now. We got to check this thing out." And I go, "All right, what is it?" He's like, "It's this thing called Decline of the Western Civilization." I'm like, "All right, put it on." And classic punk rock documentary,
Mm.
and our minds were like, ugh, like just completely blown. We
Yeah.
watched it like 4 times in a row, and we immediately became ex Circle Jerks, Black Flag, and Fear fans. Like immediately, like
Yeah.
just it was like the because we had exposure to AC/DC, The Who, Zeppelin, Sabbath, stuff like that, but we almost considered that like our parents' music.
Right.
This was like 84, This would have been like, yeah, 84, so 82,
Okay.
84, somewhere
Yeah.
around there. But, that was all old stuff.
Right.
But like hearing this stuff, which was only like maybe a year or two old at that point, we were like, and it was the heaviest stuff we'd ever heard,
Hmm.
outside of like, Iron Maiden, like Dio and things like that. But I didn't really, that stuff didn't really click with me, like dragons and rainbows, and like I was like, it's cool, but like it just didn't speak to me.
Hmm.
So we watched this video, and right after that, our homework assignment for each other was he was going to go out and get the Circle Jerks and Fear, and I was going to go out and get X and Black Flag. So I literally went to the Rhode Island Mall,
Oh.
hopped on my skateboard, went to the Rhode Island Mall, and I got a cassette of Family Man by Black Flag, which is a spoken word instrumental
Yeah.
album.
That one's not
And
that great.
it's not that great.
Yeah.
In retrospect, it's not that great. But at the time, I thought it was really cool. But it
Hmm.
didn't have any of the songs that we were familiar with now from Decline of the Western Civilization.
Right.
So I played it for Andy, and he was like, "Yeah, this doesn't have depression on it. It doesn't have Police Story on it, and all this stuff."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, man." So I went out the next weekend and I found Damaged on cassette, and like it opened the door to everything else after that. Like it literally was a very, very pivotal moment for me. I remember when I bought the record literally 2 years later. I got the vinyl, and this is
Oh,
like my original copy from '86.
really?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, wow. Can you show me the back of that, please?
yeah.
Um, can you get the bottom a little bit? Really raise it a little higher? Oh, okay. Well, so that's like a third pressing or something like
It'd be
that?
like a second or a third pressing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's
yeah.
it doesn't have the unicorn
No, it's not Unicorn with this is an anti-parent record.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I wish.
Yeah,
This
that's
is like a
still
second or a third pressing.
yeah.
But
Well,
still, I was,
yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's still a valuable record. I mean,
definitely.
obviously those first pressings with the unicorn and the anti-parents sticker,
Yeah,
the legendary story of the
the
anti-parenting
unicorn.
sticker. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
that's probably in almost $200 if it's in really great condition.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that kind of strikes me as strange. It's not to take away from your story. I'm sorry to interrupt
No,
you,
no, no,
but
dude. We're here to just talk, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all
Well,
good.
how do you feel about that? Like, like all these punk bands, right? So, like, you think about yourself, like in '84. How old were you when you first heard that and you wanted to get
So
it?
I heard this. I would have heard this in '84, and I was 10 years old.
10. Wow.
No, 12 years old. I was 12 years old.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
still
So I
pretty
was
young
born in
for
'70. Was
for
that?
that. That's still pretty
Yeah.
young for intense punk like that.
Yeah,
But
we were into skateboarding. That was the thing.
right,
Is we were totally into skateboarding, and like if you were a skateboarder, you listen to punk rock. At least that's what we heard.
right,
And Black Flag wasn't the first punk rock I'd ever heard. I really heard the Clash before that because like combat rock was popular at that time. But
oh yeah,
I honestly didn't know that was punk rock. I just thought it was like
right.
cool shit you heard on the radio.
Well, by '84, it
Um,
wasn't really very punk.
no, it
Yeah,
wasn't very punk.
yeah,
You got Glenn Johns who mixed it and whatnot. It's still great. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but
No, I love it.
um, but yeah, and before that, we had talked about like the album that really like blew my mind, and I heard it when I was 11 was Funhouse by the Stooges.
Oh wow.
That's literally my top three albums of all time, and always will be.
Hmm.
But it was Damaged that really like just it just checked all the boxes. Like
Right.
I think right around that time period, I had discovered Dylan.
Hmm.
My dad had a 45 of Positively 4th Street, and I didn't know what the hell it was. I thought it was really cool, and I then heard like a Rolling Stone, so of course I had to go out and get Highway 61. I was like 11, I think, and
Hmm.
I just fell in love with it, and then went back to some of the other albums like Free Will and whatnot. And of course, I was like, this is the most amazing protest music I've ever heard, but it wasn't mine. It was of another generation. It was somebody else's. So it
Right.
wasn't written, from in my time. It wasn't written in my lifetime. It was
Yeah.
written in previous lifetime.
Uh-huh.
This was my protest music. Like I put on Rise Above, and I was like, like, oh my god,
Right.
this is the anger that I feel for getting bullied at school.
Yeah.
This is everything, and
Right.
you know, it then introduced everything else. we'd get Thrasher magazine and going, oh, who's Husker Du? We'll go get Husker Du. What's Suicidal Tendencies? We're gonna get Suicidal Tendencies. Oh, what's the Ramones? We'll get the Ramones. Like we just snowballed.
Right.
It just opened up everything.
That's great. So what I was saying about the record though is this, like, how do you feel about punk rock records especially, like, just command such a high fucking price tag? And it's just, I feel personally that it's contrary to what the movement was all about in the first place.
Totally.
But at the same time, now here we are, like, decades later, and you can't find a first pressing. Not that that's terribly relevant, but I mean, if you wanted to find a first pressing of any of those records, any of those that you mentioned, you're going to pay $100 minimum.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was like, trying to find sort of first pressing like Misfit singles, forget it.
Oh yeah.
Just forget it. $300-$400.
Thousands now.
Forget it. Now they're thousands. Exactly. Yeah. When I was first like on eBay, like that was the stuff I was looking for when I first got on eBay, where you could actually, find records and whatnot.
Yeah.
And actually, the very first record I ever bought on eBay was Funhouse by the Stooges, because I had toured all over the country and literally went to every single record store trying to find a copy of it, because it hadn't been reissued at that point.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So you just couldn't find it. Like nobody got rid of them. You could find a copy of Raw Power and you could find the first record, no problem. But trying to find Funhouse, forget it. It was like a needle in a haystack. Right. So yeah, the fact that all these records command such high prices, it's all just nostalgia. Is really what it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're hankering for something that you never really had in the past, or maybe did have in the past, and it got swiped, in that apartment, the first apartment that you were living in.
Right.
Dude, there's so many records I wish I had that, just walked, nothing like that. I didn't have a lot of those rare things that we're talking about.
Right.
Some of the SST stuff that I have is probably some of the rarest, punk rock stuff that I have. I got a lot of first pressings, but whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's just the music. That's what means the most to me.
Right. But and then your listening experience on vinyl. I mean, are you a vinyl enthusiast? You prefer to listen to it on vinyl if you can?
Yeah. I've literally got a room set up in my house. We call it the rec room because it's mostly my records and my turntable. I have a separate integrated receiver and phono preamp and turntable and speakers just set up for that. There's no CDs in there. There's no streaming. It's just my vinyl.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. It's the ritual, It's like you kind of have to dedicate the time, and then, you find it, put it down, probably clean it, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The nitty-gritty machine, the whole thing, man. It's all part of the process.
Cool.
And that you can't replicate that any other way. That's the way that I grew up. It's
right.
And it you probably feel the same way. At least anybody that knows a vinyl enthusiast, they feel the same way. There's certain records that, to me, it doesn't. The recording doesn't sound as good unless it has the surface noise in it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Try a Little Tenderness by Otis Redding. The 45 that I have, that was my father's, is the best sounding, copy of Try a Little Tenderness I've ever heard in my entire life, because it's supposed to sound that way to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, see, that was something that my wife brought up to me, like, early into my reselling career. Like, I had just started, and so I was just like, I listen to everything that I get. Yeah. So I had put on like a Bob Dylan record. I think it was his first volume of Best Of, and I wasn't thinking anything of it. I was on the computer, doing some research, and just had it on in the background. And she's just like, is that right? And I'm like, what do you mean, is it right? Or I think I asked her was what it was. I was just like, do you hear that? Does that? And she's just like, what are you talking about? I was just like, you can hear the little bit of crackling and popping. And she's just like, yeah, it's a record. It's like, it's supposed to do that, right? I was just like, no, I don't think it's supposed to. Like, and then like I went on to like find other records. I bought new records since.
Yeah.
And with like a brand new record, it won't really have that.
No.
I mean, but you're saying that that's kind of part of the charm of listening to it that way.
100%. There was, in the 90s, the place either burned down or closed, and I can't remember, but there was a pawn shop across the street from Central High School. There's still a pawn shop there, but there was a second floor above it back in the
Oh,
90s,
okay.
and it was a huge ass room. It was like 20 by 20 or something like that. It was big.
Yeah.
And they had all these four-tier shelves, five-tier shelves all around the entire room. And the idea was it was a buck of vinyl, and it didn't matter what it was, buck of vinyl.
Whoa.
And me and my roommate, we would go up there on a Saturday, as soon as they opened at like 10, 11 a.m., whatever. We would stay there until they closed at like 7 o'clock at night and just, pull record after record. And of course, you're weeding through, 500 copies of like Hot August Night by Neil Diamond. Of course, you can take one, but 1,000 copies of, Deja Vu by, Crosby, Stills, and Nash or whatever. But
Right.
that pristine copy of a stereo version of My Favorite Things by John Coltrane, original pressing, I still got it. I bought it for $1.
Wow.
Surface noise, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of comforting to hear, because I sometimes get records and I'm just like, it kind of sounds like shit. Like, I don't know if anyone's gonna want this.
You got to grade them right. As long as you grade them right and you know what you're getting into, because
Right.
there's and you got to grade the cover and you got to grade the vinyl. That's
Right.
how to me, when I buy records, that's what I want to see. It's like, okay, you got a mint cover, but the actual vinyl is like a D. All right, how much do you want for it?
Right.
Because I've done that many, many, many times where I'll get a mint cover for something, and I'll find a better, pristine copy of the vinyl elsewhere, but the cover was shit, and I'll merge the two together, and there you go.
Right. Yeah, that's actually, I've been thinking about that, because sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll get a whole heap of records or something, and I'll look through them and I'll be like, oh, I got this perfect vinyl copy of Neil Young's After the Gold Rush, but the jacket's just shit. It's just torn apart. And
Yeah,
and then I was just like, well, I'm gonna find another one of these, I'm sure. So
that's it.
yeah.
That's how my copy of Let's Stay Together was. I got it for $1 at that place, at that pawn shop, and the vinyl was horrible, but the cover, I'd say it was at least a B plus, maybe an A minus. It was in really good shape. But the vinyl, as soon as you put it down, it was like
Skipping, possibly.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But and skipping, but I ended up, getting another copy of it elsewhere, probably another pawn shop or whatever. The vinyl was in much better condition. Merged the two.
There you go. Perfect. That's nice when that works out that way.
Yeah, doesn't happen often, but
Yeah, you have to holding out for it to happen.
holding out. Yeah, the needle in the haystack.
Yeah. So let me ask you. It doesn't seem like through your lengthy career of all the bands you've been in, it seems that there are a few vinyl releases that you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the
Yeah,
Kilgore stuff is all CDs and cassettes.
Well, there's thankfully there's two things that Kilgore exists. The best thing, one of the best feelings I've ever had during Kilgore was we did a European tour in '99 with Fear Factory and Spine Shank, and it was like a 3-week European tour. We played a lot of country. It was awesome, a lot of fun. But we were playing at the London Astoria, and the marketing team, was in full force, and there was all posters all over the place and whatnot. So I came into the lobby of the Astoria, and there were a street team there, and they were handing out Kilgore stuff, and I thought they were just handing out stickers. And the guy handed me something, and it was a 45. It was a 45 of my band, and I was like I'm getting chills thinking about it. I freaked out. I was like, "Where did you get this?" And he was like, in the van?
Yeah, there's boxes
no.
of them.
Yeah, there's boxes of them. You want some? I'm like, yeah, I'm the singer. And he was like, you are? I'm like, yeah. So he gave me 5 or 6 of them or something like that. And the rest of the guys were like, what? So we all surrounded these guys, and so it's a somewhat of a rarity. I only think they pressed up maybe 500 copies or something like that. But you can find them every once in a while on eBay. I have 2 copies left, because I did auction a few off for a benefit that we did. And the last record we did.
Right, yeah. That was also a limited edition though, right?
Yeah, we did this on vinyl. So
That's cool.
We did it on color vinyl too. So it's
That
fun.
was specifically for contributors to your Indiegogo, right? Because you were raising
Yeah,
money
we
for
have it
that.
available up on our website too. So we've done a lot of sales through there. Originally, it was just the Indiegogo thing, but we decided it was like, well, we did a pressing, a fairly lengthy pressing, and the backers, fulfilled all of their we fulfilled all of their orders and whatnot. We're like, well, let's sell them. There's lots of people out there that love vinyl, and lots of people who would love to have a Kilgore record on vinyl, so let's sell them.
Yeah,
So they're up there. Yeah.
that's cool. Great,
Yeah.
man. Well, so those two so far, the new bands or the newer bands, I should say, Revival Preachers is basically out of print, even on CD.
Yeah.
Brimstone Assembly, I can't find anything about.
Nothing. Yeah. And we basically did like a 300 CD pressing. It was like an EP that was released in 2007, and that was it. We never did anything else other than that. The band broke up in 2007, and I kind
Mm.
of moved on. And that's what happens is you have kind of ideas of like oh, we'll press all of these CDs because the band's going to live on forever, and we'll just sell them at shows and whatever. And ultimately the band breaks up, or you made a recording and you're working on it, and the band breaks up and you never release it because, well, why should I press CDs of this because the band's broken up? So
Right.
just the album never comes out. So that's really what happened with Brimstone. I've got 2 albums worth of material, and a live album for Brimstone never got released. So
Hmm.
the idea is now is that the Moto Destructo is, I've got like a DistroKid thing. So, it's basically, I'm just going to put out a ton of stuff, archival stuff, digital only. I'd love to be able to press up like, more than that, but, you know,
Right.
physical copies of stuff really just don't sell like they used to.
Right.
Unless you're an active band. If you're an active band, that's a different thing. But if you're an inactive band, you're sitting on inventory. So
Yeah, it's not worth
so at
it.
least I could put it out there. And it's the kind of shitty thing. It's like, okay, you can buy your $10 library card a month and listen to everything in the universe on Spotify. And then the artists only get a penny per stream or less than a penny per stream. But, I can sell this record for $20, and people are really happy about it, and they got something physical in their hands. But you're selling to a limited audience.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, the music business is just a strange game at this point.
it's weird. I just don't understand it. I'm a dinosaur. I came from kind of the last of the old school, major labels and things like that. And I know very well how that works and the pitfalls of that. So
Right. Right. Well, maybe we should get into this record a little bit
sure,
because I don't want to take up your whole night.
you can take up my
Uh,
night. It's fine. Yeah,
but so the first song is Rise Above. And
yeah.
this is obviously like the most anthemic song, if not certainly of the Black Flag catalog, if not the entire punk movement of that
Yeah,
generation.
100%. That to me is like that's like Rocks off of Exile on Main Street. That's London Calling off of London Calling. It's the perfect album opener. Like that's a high fidelity thing. Like looking for that perfect album opener, and like to
Mm,
me, I think Rise Above is like one of the best album openers of any album. It's just phenomenal. It's that nervous anticipation. It's the classic Greg Ginn where it's like the wall of feedback, and then tap, 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 and the whole band comes in. It's just, oh,
yeah,
I'm waiting for it. I can feel it. I can feel it. And then Rollins comes in. It's so good, so good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. How do
kills
you,
me every time.
right now? How did you feel about Henry Rollins' performance on this recording?
It's it's juvenile.
Yeah,
It's he's not there yet.
right. He
Um,
just
the
started.
the he just started. He had done one recording with State of Alert (SOA) on Discord number 2, I think it was. It was after the Teen Idols, I think.
Hmm.
So he'd only really, done one recording before that, but the guys in Flag liked that, that he had actually some chops that he had done a recording before. Their previous singer was actually Des Cadena, who is the guitar player, the second guitar player on Damaged, And a lot of people prefer Dez over Rollins. And if you listen to any of the Dez recordings, like the Six Pack, 7 inch,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of other stuff off of Everything Went Black compilation. There's a lot of great Dez stuff out there, and he's got a similar vibe to Rollins. It has a little bit more experience to it, I think, even though he's not as trained or professional or anything like that. Because
Right.
Des would even say, he was like, "I'm not a singer. I just get up and I shout the stuff, and sometimes my voice holds out, sometimes it doesn't."
Right.
And Rollins kind of does the same thing on this record. He's just going for broke. He's really listening to Dukowski and Greg Ginn coaching him along, going, "You can do this. Give it more energy. Give it more angst. Give it everything you have."
Right.
And most of the stuff on this record is like one take, because it had to be. Like
Yeah.
his voice would have just been shreds if he
Right.
did 5 takes of Rise Above. Forget it.
Right. So, how much influence would you say that this had? I'm assuming that this had the most influence on your what you ended up doing in Kilgore, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
because that's straight up hardcore music. I mean, hardcore heavy metal.
With Kilgore, when we started, we started off in high school in like 1990, 91, something like that, and we all went to LaSalle, right down the road. We all went to LaSalle Academy, and the music program there was a concert band, and we basically once a semester got together and played for the student body, like these concerts in the basement, and we played fusion, we'd play rock, we'd play jazz, we'd play blues, and all kinds of stuff. And I was the drummer in the advanced band with Michael Pelletier, who was on guitar in Kilgore, and Jason Smith, who was the bass player in Kilgore. And Brian McKenzie, the other guitar player and chief songwriter, was in the intermediate band with Bill Sutherland. And Brian had these original songs that he was writing, and he asked all the guys to be in this band. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, man, I got these guys, and we're going to do an original metal bands, kind of like Faith No More, it was kind of big at the time with the Real Thing.
Mm-hmm.
Faith No More meets like, Metallica." And I was like, "That sounds cool." And I thought he was asking me to play drums. And he was like, "Any singers?" And I'm like, "Well, who you got playing drums?" He's like, "Oh, we got Bill." And I'm like, "Hmm." So, any singers? I'm like, "Yeah, I know a singer." And he was like, "Who?" And I'm like, "Me." And he was like, "You can sing?" I'm like, "Yeah." I just completely bluffed my way. I'd never sang before, but I just had this confidence about it. Like, I sang along to Beatles records. I sang along to Doors records. I sang along to Misfits records and Black Flag and Bad Brains. So these guys were really, really talented, but they were very into thrash. They were like, Anthrax, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Testament, Forbidden. And
Yeah.
I was like very much hardcore punk. And I was like, let's do a meld of the two.
Yeah.
And Danzig was fairly popular at that time with his first album, Mother and
Oh
Twisted
yeah.
Keen, and She Rides and whatnot. So
Right.
we just kind of did a meld of the two, and we eventually kind of found our sound. But
Hmm.
Rollins was a huge. I saw him on the Lollapalooza in '91. And then I saw him again the next year in '92, I think, at Babyhead.
Oh
And
wow.
that was like, I was like, that's what I want to do. I wasn't even remotely close to that, and it took a few years to kind of find my own thing. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's funny. So the way you kind of got into Kilgore was similar actually to the way that Henry Rollins got into Black Flag,
yeah,
because he was just a fan and they had this like impromptu show, I guess, that he was
yeah,
at, and they were like, they just invited him up to like sing one of the songs,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
just
he had to go back to D.C. to start his opening shift at Haagen Dazs
right.
in Georgetown,
Yeah.
and they asked him what song he wanted to play, and he was like, "Play Clocked In," because I had to go to work right after this. And they handed him the mic. He got up on stage. They liked what he heard, and I
Right.
called him, I think, like a week later, and asked him to come up to New York and jam with the band. Boom.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just that overconfidence that just put forth that all into performing that song, and
Yeah.
that's what kind of sold them on it.
I don't know if it was even like, confidence. It was just, yeah, I guess it was to some degree.
Yeah.
His whole thing was Ian MacKaye was, a huge push, for him.
Right.
They were, still are like really, really good friends. And he was like, "Dude, you have to do this. You're going to be fantastic at it. Go." For me, it was, I started out as a drummer. I started out in marching band in 1984. And I think I was 12 at the time. Yeah, so I think it was 12, and I started marching band in seventh grade. And our instructor was this really kooky cat named Les Hirschberger.
Mm.
Hawaiian shirts, cargo shorts, John Lennon glasses, red beard. You know, he was a character. But I walked in and he said, "Hey, you want to be you want to be a musician?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What do you want to play?" And I go, "I want to play saxophone." He goes, "I got too many saxophone players. I need tuba players and I need drummers." And I go, "Well, I guess I'm going to be a drummer." And the cool thing about Les was the way he taught his class, because it was an elective class, but it was part of your your daily classes. The
Mm.
way he taught the class was, you came into class and he goes, "Today we're going to learn about the clarinet." Okay. And this is before any of us, before I learned any of the fundamentals of drumming. We're going to learn about the clarinet. Okay. So this is a clarinet. You've got a mouthpiece, the reed goes in here, and as you blow into it, it causes tones to go through this pipe, and as you press these keys on here, it lengthens or shortens the tube, thereby changing the pitch. And we learned everything about the clarinet.
Hmm.
In a couple of days, we learned everything about the clarinet, and we tried playing the clarinet. And then the next day it was trumpet, and the next day it was flute, the next day it was tenor saxophone, and we went through the entire marching band that way. So, years later, I never really thought about it because I play a lot of instruments, or I try to play a lot of instruments, but
Yeah.
I just go for it. I don't. Oh, I need a mandolin part on this. I don't know any mandolin players. Fuck it, I'll get a mandolin, and I'll just figure it out, right?
Right.
Because Les, he put that confidence in me that, well, just give it a shot. Just go for it. If you have the
Right.
fundamentals down, just go for it.
Right. I
And
mean,
I,
if you
and I
can,
really did the same thing with singing.
yeah.
Just go for it.
Right. I mean, if you can make a noise on anything, you can make music out of it.
Totally.
It's just a matter of
I,
like,
you know,
what do you want to make
John,
out of?
John Lennon. I'm a fucking artist. Throw me a tuba, I'm gonna get a sound out of it.
Right.
And not that I'm trying to compare myself to John Lennon, but I just had that confidence of like, my drums were in storage. We moved back to Rhode Island, and my drums were in storage, and I wasn't able to play music. But I had my father's like 15.8K archtop guitar, and I was like,
Hmm.
let me see if I can find how to play like Blitzkrieg Bob. Okay, and boom, okay, I guess I can play guitar now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
just go
that's
from
cool.
there.
So, what you've mentioned from your dad so far, I mean, what did your dad do? Because he seemed like a cool guy. He seemed like he had a pretty good collection of music and
He's an
everything.
interesting guy.
Yeah.
Not a musician. He bought it. He was in the Air Force, so I think he had a number of buddies that kind of coaxed him into like spending his money on things. So he bought an acoustic guitar, and didn't know how to play, and tried it a little bit and kind of gave it up. So it was just in a corner for like most of my life.
Hmm.
But he had a really cool 45 collection, and he had this really, really great Sony two-track reel-to-reel that I was obsessed with, because it was like, who had a reel-to-reel player? Like
Yeah.
in the 80s, nobody really had one. So he had this thing, and what it was he got it when he was in Okinawa in the Air Force, and all of his Air Force buddies had all these records, and he taped all their records.
Hmm.
So, it was like, putting something on cassette back then. So I had this reel-to-reel collection that was like, Ray Charles, the Supremes, the Ventures, the Beatles, and it was all this stuff. And one tape that had Exile on Main Street on one side and LA Woman on the other side. And he didn't even know what it was. He was like, I don't know. I've never heard this before in my life. And I was obsessed with it.
Huh.
So, yeah,
That's
kind
cool.
of stemmed from there.
Yeah. So who was your musical influence in your family? Was your mom? It was your dad, or was your mom?
No, nobody.
Really?
Nobody played music. My dad, gravitated towards, rock, what we would consider classic rock now these days. So
Right.
I tended to listen to all the stuff that he kind of did. And, eventually, once I discovered Black Flag and punk rock and whatnot, I turned my back on all that stuff. I thought it was old hat, and
Right.
I was wrong. It's all, fantastic. And I love that stuff even more to this day. And actually, I listen to more of that stuff than I listen to punk rock.
Hmm.
The only musician in my family was my grandmother. My grandmother had a Hammond organ pretty much in her entire life, and she would play Rodgers and Hammerstein and, like show tunes, Cole Porter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And to this day, I love the sound of a Hammond organ because of that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it was an influence, but it was really the combination of not having any friends. Like I literally didn't have any friends. I had one friend. I was out in California, and my one friend lived in Rhode Island.
Right.
So it was just the my friend was music and books. That's all I had. And once I joined the band, I finally found a tribe of weirdos just like me.
Right.
And I went, oh, all right, and I just followed it. When I moved from California back to Rhode Island, I went to Cranston High School West for a semester, and they didn't have a band program there, and I got my ass kicked all the time
Hmm.
because I wore exploited T-shirts, and I had hair that I looked like Tony Hawk, and I wore Doc Martens and trench coats, and everybody else was in IROCs and Cavaricis and
Yeah.
mullets, and it just didn't go well at all.
Right. Oh, you were a
Until
West
I
kid, huh?
went to LaSalle and found a music program there, and I found more of my tribe. I had
Right.
friends again. So
That's cool. So Kilgore was the first band you actually partook in.
yeah, technically the first band I was ever in was a straight edge hardcore band called No Excuse in 1988, and it was one dude from LaSalle and a couple of dudes from School One, and we loved Minor Threat, we loved Black Flag, we loved Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, and at that time, like New York hardcore, like Gorilla Biscuits and Chain of Strength and Youth of Day and all that stuff was big in the hardcore scene. So we were
Hmm.
trying to emulate that kind of stuff, and I was playing drums in that band. Lasted like maybe a year, something like that. We played a couple of shows. We played at AS220 in '89, and I think we played the Skate Hut was an old skate park in Rhode Island in the late '80s. Tony Alva, not Tony Alva, Fred Smith, who was on Alva Skateboards, was a part owner. And they did shows in this basement. I saw Jawbreaker there and a few others,
Hmm.
and we played a show at Under the Hut with No Excuse.
Oh
So
wow.
Square One. We were called Square One. We were called Square One. Yeah. And then there was a hardcore band after that called No Excuse. And then the next band I was in Kilgore.
Huh.
But I was playing drums in those bands, so I had no inkling to really sing until Kilgore came around.
Right. Cool. Um, let's get back to the record.
Sure.
Spray paint.
Spray paint the walls. It feels good to do what I want. It feels good to stay alive. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that I love about punk rock from this time period, and especially bands like Black Flag and the Misfits and whatnot, were 30-second blasts of just adrenaline. I love that, and I
Right.
think Spray Paint is 34 seconds. I think is what the time is on this.
Yeah. I'll probably be able to play the whole song actually.
Yeah, yeah. As we're like fumbling around here, uh, 32 seconds.
Hmm.
It's 32 seconds. And God bless punk rock for that. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see the Ramones when they were
No.
playing, but um, the old joke was, yeah, I saw the Ramones. How many songs they play? All of them. Like, because you just go and they play like 60 songs, or it felt like 60 songs, because it'd be
Yeah.
a minute and a half of like pure bliss, and then right back to it.
Yeah.
Minute and a half, another song. Minute and a half, another song. Love it.
Right. Yeah. No, I never got to see any like good legendary punk bands. I don't think. No. The only I think the only punk band I've seen is like the Melvins.
Yeah, and they're not exactly punk, but dude,
Yeah.
love the Melvins. Huge,
Right.
huge, huge, huge fan. So
Yeah. That was my
cool.
first show. I think it was 95, 94 or 95 at
Love that
Lupo's.
Lupos. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
so it was
there.
Melvin's L7 and
L7.
Wool.
Yep.
Remember Wool?
Yep, I was there.
Oh, you
I was
were?
there. Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was my first show.
Every single time the Melvins played between 1990 and probably 2000, I was at pretty much every local show, unless I was on tour. But
Mm.
I went to every single Melvin show I could possibly go to. My favorite one was I had gone to see Mike Watt and Hovercraft and the Foo Fighters. It was their first tour,
Oh
or
yeah.
first national tour. So I went over to go see the Foos play because I was, I like Nirvana. And I was like, I liked what I heard from the Foos. So I was like, I'll go over to Lupo's and check it out. And then after I see the Foos, I'll go right over to Babyhead and see the Melvins. So I went over to Lupo's, watched the Foo Fighters play. They were fantastic. And then I ran down to Babyhead and caught the Melvins. So I'm sitting there watching the Melvins, and this dude is like fucking headbanging in front of me and is like, just thrashing all around and everything like that. And he crashes back into me and turns around. He's like, dude, I'm so sorry. And I was Dave Grohl. So I was like, that's really cool. I was like, dude, I just saw you play. And he was like, dude, I love the Melvins. Are you kidding me? I'm like,
wow, that's awesome.
Yep.
That's a testament to how cool that guy is.
He's a cool dude.
Just, plays a show and then runs out probably just as fast as you did.
Exactly. Like you were just on stage. You were just on stage. Now you're here.
That's
you're
crazy.
Still sweaty. I was like, dude, that's awesome, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, man. That's great.
He's a cool dude. I met him a couple times after that too. He's a really good dude. He's awesome.
I have only heard good things. I've never heard a bad story about him.
Yeah.
One day I'll get to meet him.
Yeah.
Let's see, Six Pack.
There's a couple of songs on this record, like for me, like Six Pack and TV Party. They're kind of jokey songs.
Yeah, a little silly.
Yeah, and they're kind of like the comic relief in between all of the aggression and whatnot. And it's not like, when I was younger, I used to skip over those songs, and now I don't, because I still love them because they're part of this. But that, Dukowski, the bass player in this, if you read anything about him, Rollins would always describe him as like lead bass player, because he had that very distorted, sound, and it really cut through the mix on a lot of stuff. And this song, when it opens up, that's Chuck just cutting right through before everything comes in. And it's that dun, 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 it's the build of everything until the again feedback comes in and the whole band starts crashing in. I just love it. And the gang vocals, Six Pack, it's all the elements of classic hardcore done very, very well, and then it gets aped out of control after that, and it gets really homogenized and kind of, I was talking about this to a friend of mine a few years back, Tom Zanini, and because he listens to a ton of hardcore, and still to this day. And,
I know Tom.
Yeah, Tom's a great dude.
I went to school with him.
What's that?
I went to school with him.
You went to school with Tom?
Yeah.
He's a great dude. He owns what's the name of the barbershop? It's in Cranston, but he owns a barbershop now, and he does pretty well. And he's a great dude. He was a huge Kilgore fan. I officiated his wedding. That's how far we go back.
Oh, that's awesome.
But Tom and I were talking about hardcore, and I was like, dude, I don't really listen to a lot of hardcore anymore. Like, there's only a handful of bands that I gravitate towards on a regular basis. I listen to the Roar sessions by Bad Brains. I listen to Damage by Black Flag. I listen to the Minor Threat discography, which you can listen to in a half an hour, and it's 30 songs. And I listen to the Misfits, Static Age by the Misfits. That's it. Like, there's really not anything else that. In God We Trust by Dead Kennedys, I tend to put that on every once in a while as well. But everything else that I used to, judge, Gorilla Biscuits, Cro-Mags. I put it on. I get 3 songs in, and I'm like,
that was enough.
Get kind of, it was the time, but now it just doesn't hold my attention, or it's too repetitive. There's not enough dynamics. That's what I love about this record is it's not just constant bombardment. It's got peaks and valleys. It's got dynamics. It's perfect to me.
All right, so we were on Six Pack. So What I See is next.
Yeah, I'm not right. You're not right. Sometimes I gotta close my eyes. Yeah. Another, I believe this was written by Chuck Dukowski, and it's got that really different time signature, which I always found really fascinating, like when I heard it, because it was not the conventional, like it wasn't Minor Threat, and it wasn't like, some of the other things. It wasn't Bad Brains,
Right.
so it had that really interesting time signature to it. It's one of the things that I really love about Black Flag, either with this release or going further. I don't tend to listen to a lot of the later period stuff, but one of the things that I always found really interesting about this band was that Greg Skinn's favorite band was the Grateful Dead. Like, that was literally his favorite band, and he would say it in interviews. He was like, "What's your favorite band?" Well, we don't listen to punk, like I listen to Grateful Dead. They were huge into Dio, huge into Black Sabbath, of course, but huge into ZZ Top and, Stooges and MC5 and Deep Purple and stuff like that. But I always kind of take that in consideration when there's interesting things like going on, like different time signatures that this band does. And I wonder if it's like something to do with, the Dead influence there. Not that they sound anything like the Grateful Dead in any way, shape, or form,
Right.
but to be able to like pick odd things, to influence a truly, odd hardcore song.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you could take any song really, and if you kind of just like distort it and play it really fast, it basically will become a punk song.
Exactly.
So I mean, it could.
You can
I
do that with
mean,
anything.
I've never tried to like tear this apart or like really kind of analyze it, but I assume maybe if you took these songs and slowed them down and made them a little more acoustic, it might sound a little Grateful Dead like.
The funny thing that you say that was like, that was the original inspiration for the Revival Preachers, was that I wanted to do punk covers slowed down and do them like hillbilly style with an upright bass and Damien on guitar. Like that was the original intent of the band. And I think we did early on. We did a cover of Hybrid Moments by the Misfits, and I think we tried to do some X songs, and that's it. We never got any further because we were like, well, that's kind of hokey. Like, why don't we just stick to country and just do it our way. So
Yeah. Well, even the performance of yours that I watched recently, I mean, it's just like it was kind of punk rock. I mean, like, yes, you were playing acoustic guitar. Like, yes, Damien's guitar has the very like twangy, very clear, like clean sound to it. But
Sean
Sean,
Chevalier,
yes,
yeah,
Sean,
yeah,
like that beat that he plays with the brushes, that's
yeah,
like a constant throughout the entire set. I was
yeah.
just like, his stamina is insane.
Oh yeah,
Like to be able to
yeah,
basically do a roll through an entire set,
yeah.
because that's
Constantly.
kind of what it is. I mean, it's like that
Yeah,
brushing pattern.
we that was like the bands between, I would think, like 2003, and Sean didn't come until 2004, but he did it for basically almost 2 years, 2004 and 2005, before we finally let him put in a kick drum and a hi-hat. Because we just, we were kind of getting tired of it, and he was getting tired of it as well. He's like, dude,
Right.
I'm a drummer, like I don't feel like being a metronome for you and just playing
Right.
he was a monster at doing it, and he could do it very, very, very well.
Yeah.
And but you finally get to a point where it's like, kind of enough is enough. And that was the thing about the Preachers, is like we kind of started off like believing our shit, and we were really good at it, and then we kind of saw through it. Especially at that time, we were playing a lot of like, car festivals and rockabilly, like, festivals and things like that. And we'd show up, and there'd be 5 bands that are covering, Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. Like, just everybody had the look, and everybody was playing Gretsch guitars. There was like this, it was like a uniform, and it was just, it got tiring to us, because we felt like, it wasn't like we felt like we were better than that, but we felt constrained by what we started.
Right.
It was like we started out as this thing. Everybody wants to hear just this thing, and we were like, no, we can do more than this.
Right.
And we ended up losing our upright player. He moved down to Nashville and became really, really successful down there. And then they brought in their childhood friend Rob Gare on electric bass, and it turned into, well, let's do the Kinks. Let's do the Stones. Let's do Waylon Jennings. Let's do CCR. Let's do what it was. The sky was the limit. Well,
It seems that your like singing style started off in this hardcore vein, metalish thing, and that's what you're probably best known for. At least that band was probably the most successful
Yeah.
of the many that you've been part of now. But I think that's carried over for pretty clearly. And like even the progression from the revival preachers to something like your latest project, Jay Berndt and the Orphans. It sounds like you have moments where it's very kind of like country-ish. It's kind of like almost like kind of pop rockish. Um, but then there's big moments where there's like things on that last record especially where it's just like it like totally distorted guitars and like very heavy, and even the way you guys were performing it, I was just like, this is like a punk show or like a hardcore band. Like it's kind of the same. It's just a slightly different style of genre.
It's a different, slightly, yeah, exactly, a different genre. But
Hmm.
I've always been a huge fan of dynamics,
Yeah.
and I, probably my favorite song that we did with the Orphans. Well, I had a couple, but it was a song that we did called "The Other Ones," and it was a very, a very soul. It was a very dark end of the street kind of, very much a Stax kind of soul kind of a thing,
Hmm.
and then it just devolves into massive distortion and just chaos. And that's what I always wanted. I wanted the apocalypse. I
Hmm.
wanted moments of sweetness and vulnerability that escalate into an apocalypse.
Yeah.
And that's, I thought we were able to do that fairly well.
The record is great. That's a very good
Thank you.
record. Sound is
Thank you.
great. Did you record? You didn't record that in your studio, did you?
No, we recorded some of it here in my studio. We did most of it down at the power station in New England in Waterford, Connecticut.
Okay.
Giant room, incredible acoustics. It's basically a carbon copy of the power station in New York, where Born in the USA and Let's Dance and what was Madonna's second album, Like a Virgin, like
Oh.
Chic recorded there. There was a lot of like big bands that recorded at Power Station, New York, in the early '80s,
Hmm.
and it's got a huge geometric dome.
Yeah.
It's acoustic is just amazing in there. So we were like, look, my buddy worked at the studio at the time, so we got really cheap rates there. So we did a number of sessions there where we were really the studio hadn't been used in a lot of years, so we were kind of guinea pigs.
Hmm.
Like, is there something wrong with the board? All right, we're going to reuse as many channels on the board as we can to find out what's wrong with the board. Okay, we're going to use all the cables in here and the snakes, and we're going to try out all the microphones. And so we really just went in there and shot the moon. We tried everything.
Yeah.
So we got to use like microphones that were like tens of thousands of dollars, that you normally wouldn't get a chance to do.
Right.
So there's a reason why it sounds so big. We were in a big room and we
Yeah.
used classic microphones.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I like the style of it. It's very reminiscent of like a E Street Band type of
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah, you put the horns in there and it's easy.
Right.
Yeah. I was really trying to go for my chief inspiration in the Orphans was, and I remember Dib said to me, well, what do you want the band to sound like? And I said, I want it to sound like the band backing up Van Morrison, like literally the band,
Mm.
Levon Helm and Rick
Right.
Danko and all of them. I want it to
Right.
sound like them backing up Van Morrison, like in the Last Waltz. And he was like, I'm not familiar with that reference, but let me go watch, and he did. He was like, I get it. So it was that kind of a feel. I really wanted it to be, which is it turns out that's basically Springsteen, like, because Springsteen was like so influenced by Van Morrison and Wilson Pickett and Roy Orbison and all the great '60s rock and roll and soul music that
Mm.
permeates into that sound. I really kind of came from it from more of like a Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band
Oh,
kind of
okay. Oh
thing.
yeah, I can see that too.
My dad was a huge fan, and I never really was until I realized that I was. Like, I turned my back on it, and I was somewhere, and Still the Same or Feel Like a Number off A Stranger in Town came on the radio, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't heard this since I was like fucking 10 years old, and I was like chills. I was like, oh
Mm.
my god, this is so good. So it became kind of an influence on the band as well.
Yeah, I see. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Um, let's get back into the record a little bit because
Yeah.
we're actually kind of running out of time.
Yeah, I kind of figured.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I tend to talk a lot.
that's okay. I mean, you know, I love talking to you. You're obviously just a very eloquent person and very easygoing. You know,
Thanks,
just
man.
totally chill to talk to. You know.
I love talking music, man. You know, you put something in front of me, you want to talk about music, I'm like, dude, I'll give a whole dissertation on it. Let's go.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. I love it. We left off on
We left off on what I see, and
so TV party is next.
yeah, TV party. Again, I mean, it's more of a a poke at probably society in general of like there's we've got nothing better to do than watch TV and drink,
Right.
have a couple of brews. It's corny and it's kind of goofy and whatnot, but it's like I laugh when and I catch my wife, so many times she'll be like, we're gonna have a pizza party tonight, like, because it's pizza night, or whatever,
Yeah.
we find ourselves doing that more and more over the years, so it's just kind of a goofy thing.
Yeah.
But for years I kind of shunned the song, but now I look at it as like, hey, this is, like I said earlier, it's kind of a nice moment of levity or like comic relief in a very very heavy album.
Right.
So
So after TV party was Thirsty and Miserable.
thirsty and miserable.
Okay.
Yep. This was like this was my jam for a long time. This was like on almost every mixtape that I made for people.
Mm-hmm.
In the '90s, you make friends with people or whatever, or in the '80s and the '90s. So you make them a mixtape or something like that. And Thirsty and Miserable was always on it. And then later on, when we toured with Motorhead, I discovered that Motorhead did a version of Thirsty and Miserable, and I was like, "Oh my god!" I was I'm like talking to them about it. I'm like, "Dude, so and Lemmy was just like,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, I did.
get away, kid."
When
I'm
was
trying to
that?
drink.
You were on tour with Motorhead.
When Ozfest, we did Ozfest
Oh,
in
okay.
1998, and Motorhead was on there,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was pretty funny because you figure that we would get along with all of our peers, the younger bands that were on there like Biscuit and System of Down and whatnot. We got along with all of those bands, but we tend to gravitate towards our elders, so we hit it off really well with Motorhead, and there was many a nights hanging out, or many days hanging out with them on their bus and doing many illicit substances and
I can
having a
bet.
good old time, and many strip gentlemen's clubs with Lemmy and the gang,
Yeah.
Mickey D and Phil. They were just awesome. They were really 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 cool people. They really liked our music, and that was the thing. Is just like to be on those stages and like playing our music and whatnot, and looking over and like, dude, that's Lemmy's watching our set, dude. What? Yeah, yeah, Lemmy's watching our set. We're like, dude, Megadeth. All the dudes from Megadeth are watching our set, dude. Seriously, seriously, yeah,
Yeah.
they're watching our set.
And then
Yeah.
Ozzy, of course. I mean, did Ozzy ever watch? Do you think?
Ozzy never really watched. Ozzy at that time period, we didn't know. Now we know, but he apparently relapsed, and he was drinking again. We didn't really see him all that much. We thought he was on like pain medication or something like that, and he kind of shuffled around quite a bit. And it was the weirdest thing because you'd see him backstage every once in a while, and he was just like, "What are you doing?" And that was really it. And then they'd push him out on stage, and it was like a light switch went off, and he was like, "All right, you motherfuckers!" It was like every Ozzy video you'd ever seen. It was amazing.
Yeah.
He was just a pro at it. But there was a few times that we got a chance to hang out with him, and it was awesome. It was really cool. Sharon was the one who really was there. Like she'd come and watch our set. I think she caught us like maybe like 3 or 4 times, and that was always really cool. And of course the kids were there. Jack would watch our set and everything. We'd hang out with Jack and everything like that. It was cool. It
Yeah.
was cool.
That's great, man. Wow, what a bunch of great tour stories you have.
Yeah, I got a few. I got a few.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, we already did Thirsty and Miserable.
Yeah,
Police Story is next one.
Oh man, that man, fuck this city ruled by pigs, taking the rights away from all the kids. Understand, we're fighting a war. We can't win. They hate us. We hate them. We can't win. No way,
Right.
dude. I have listened to that song probably a gazillion times. I mean, so many times. It really For me, it cemented this kind of distrust and authority always.
Right.
Like after this record, it was like I don't trust authority. In this is really where my disenchantment with law enforcement, governments, the military, they're all fine institutions for other people, but like for me, it was always something I was kind of rallying against.
Right.
This is the box that you need to be in, and this is this is the rosy life that you're supposed to lead, kind of thing. I really feel like it stems from this record. It really started with Rise Above and Police Story for me on this
Yeah.
record.
Yeah,
It
I can
really
see
spoke
that.
to me.
Yeah, I mean, and it's still completely relevant today. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
the beauty behind it, really. I mean, so you can keep on listening to this, and it still has the same
This is
sentiment.
like I started kind of saying like Dylan was my father's protest music. For me, this was my protest music, and then shortly after this, it was Taste of the Nation, Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy. That was
Oh yeah.
it wasn't written for me, but I considered it part of my protest music as well. Fear
Yeah.
of the Black Planet. I thought it was some of the best things that I've ever heard in my entire life.
Right.
Still to this day. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I agree with that. Gimme, gimme, gimme.
Give me some more. Yeah, like, and this was, it's funny because I actually enjoy the Keith Morris of the Circle Jerks. He was the original singer of Black Flag, and
Hmm.
he did a version of Gimme, Gimme, Gimme that was eventually released on Everything Went Black, which is a compilation of all the unreleased recordings and whatnot. And
Right.
I think his version of Gimme Gimme is the definitive version. And I think Rollins would say that as well. He was like,
Oh
no,
yeah.
it's Keith's song.
Hmm.
They tagged this on here. It's a great song. The performance on here is great. I don't think Rollins' performance on this song is great,
Right.
but it's still an awesome song. I love it. It's still part of this record. I love this record, but I prefer the Keith Morris version.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to that again. I had that CD briefly, the
Hmm.
Everything Went Black, but I don't really remember it.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where it's like the original copy that I have was the lawsuit, or prior to the lawsuit, so it doesn't even say Black Flag on it.
Oh, okay.
It just has the bars on it, and then it has like all these fake names for the people who sang on the songs.
Right.
So like for years, like this is before the internet and whatnot. I was just like, who is Chavo Pederast? Like I didn't realize it was Ron Reyes from Decline of the Western Civilization who sang on the Jealous Again 7-inch or 12-inch, and so
Hmm.
it was like this kind of like you had to dig to figure out what it is. But now you listen to that record, Everything Went Black, and you obviously can look it up on Wikipedia and it'll break down who all the different singers are on it, and
Right.
it's a really interesting because they repeat a lot of the same songs. So you'll get like Police Story, Gimme Gimme Gimme, and Depression by Keith Morris. You'll get Gimme Gimme Gimme, Police Story, and Depression by Chavo or Ron Reyes, and then you'll get Gimme Gimme Gimme, Police Story, and Depression from Dez.
Yeah.
And now on this record you got Gimme Gimme Gimme,
Yeah.
Police Story, and Depression by Rollins. So you can kind of go through each of the different singer lineups and pick which is your favorite.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that's interesting. Yeah, this band has had so many kind of crazy lineups, like, and not, I mean, they're not drastic. I mean, sometimes it's just like a member moving over to a different instrument.
totally.
But yeah, it's kind of hard to follow when like you haven't kind of been there from the beginning.
When it's if you're along for the ride, if you've digested that pill and you're like, I'm gonna, you've taken the acid and you're like, I'm strapping in.
Right.
I just I gotta see this whole thing through. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I'm here.
Right.
That's how I was with Black Flag. I was with them until the very end, and the stuff at the end I really didn't like, like at all.
Hmm.
But you'd find like good moments here and there, like Drinking and Driving off of In My Head is fantastic. The production is awful, but it's very 87 or 86 metal. It's
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's still some bright spots in the later period stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a band like this, you kind of expect that. It happens,
Yeah,
unfortunately, with progression, right? I mean,
totally.
right.
Yeah, they burned out on hardcore. They were like, let's go to the next thing, and if you're just jamming to like MC5 and Funhouse and Dio, well, it's gonna have a clear direction on your music. You're still gonna do what you do, but you might slow things down and
Hmm.
kind of go for different jams. And that's what they did with My War.
Right. Yeah, that's the one I am probably most familiar with, actually.
Mm,
So, depression is next.
yeah.
How do you feel about depression?
Uh, this is there's so many songs on this record that I love. It's funny because I was introduced to this song with the Ron Ray's version off of Decline of Set Western Civilization. So when I got this record the first time I heard it, I was expecting to hear it the delivery done that way. And no, I love Rollins' delivery on this one. It's really fantastic. You could tell the songs on this record that it was like these words speak to me, even though I didn't write these words. These words speak to me, and I
Hmm.
can sing. This is coming from the heart. And he does it on depression. On some of these songs that other singers had sang. I think this is probably his best. This one and Police Story are probably the best of the older songs that were done by other singers. These are probably the two best ones on this record,
Yeah.
of the older ones.
Yeah, this one I like a lot too.
It's fantastic, and it's just that that the apocalypse and
Right.
it's just right here. So good.
Right. But then lyrically speaking as well, I mean, for depression, I mean, like, did that kind of speak to you just kind of equally
Oh
as much as
yeah.
like Police Story?
Police Story, it was the anti-authority thing, but depression spoke to me like literally
Right.
because it wasn't that I was depressed, or maybe I was and I didn't know it, but I was at a young age. I was 12 years old when I heard this record.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had one friend who was like a thousand miles away from me, and when I was living out in California, I didn't have any friends. So to me, this kind of just spoke to me. It was like, fuck, man, nobody understands me. I got no friends. I'm a weirdo, and so it spoke to me. I didn't know if I had depression or anything like that, but I could relate to the feelings that he was trying to convey in the song.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever kind of like think about that in the future as far as like, as you get older? Like, do
Oh,
you ever
sure.
have any depression issues or anything like that?
Um, I had more like anxiety issues,
Hmm.
probably in the Kilgore days, because it was just so much going on, and just being pulled in 1,000 different directions and being broke all the time, no money, not sure where the next food was going to come from, and all that kind of stuff. So it would cause like stress and anxiety, but
Hmm.
never really a depression. It wasn't until like probably the preacher days or like the brimstone days when it's like you start, as you start getting into your 30s, you start like actually dissecting like your life. I felt like my 20s were an entire blur because you're just living by the seat of your pants. But
Right.
in your 30s you're starting to kind of like, well, I got a job now, I got to like, I guess this is a career, isn't it? And yeah, I'm
Hmm.
playing music and this and that and the other thing, but you kind of start dissecting more about your life and things that went on in your life and things that were unresolved, and so yeah, I wouldn't say that I had depression at that time, but I definitely sought out the advice of a therapist.
Hmm.
Just get a completely unbiased opinion, or just somebody to listen to me. That's not my wife. Like, I love my wife, she's my best friend. I
Right.
love hanging out with her, but she's already heard all my fucked up shit like a gazillion times.
Right.
So to give it to somebody else from a completely different perspective, you don't have to like your family. What? Really? No. You can say that your father's an asshole, even though he's a nice guy and everybody likes him. If, you don't have to. Like, I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, like, so it just, it opens everything up. You start unraveling that ball of twine, and it's like, next thing you know, it's like, oh my God.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll probably get into that sometime soon. I feel like everyone.
Yeah.
No, literally we've been talking about it like as far as like kind of doing some counseling or something because yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. I got to figure it
Yeah.
out. So.
And honestly, it was just a good place. It's finding the right person.
Right.
That's the thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my father. I don't want to speak ill of the man because he's not a bad guy. He really isn't. He just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't around. He just wasn't there. Mentally, he just wasn't there. Like, he was somewhere else. Like, and
Yeah.
I have some good memories of him, certain things here and there in my life, but for the most part, it was my mom's. She was always there. And my dad was always working. You know, he's always doing some sort of project, and he was just never around. You know, he didn't beat us, but there's a lot of unresolved kind of disappointment, and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I was always looking for. My grandfather was a hell of a strong man, an amazing man, and somebody that I really really looked up to, and I could tell him anything. And he was a really really great dude. He died in '95, and I was always looking for that kind of replacement. And my therapist is really that guy. He's like that guy that I've always been looking for, like my grandfather, that I can sit and, if I want to talk about the Red Sox for an hour and pay him to sit and talk about the Red Sox, that's fine, But
Right.
if I want to talk about unresolved issues and whatever, we can talk about that, or the stress that I'm having at my job, or the fight I got in with. I don't really fight my whole life, but whatever, the tiff that me and my wife got into, or whatever. I want to say 9 times out of 10, I always walk out going, "Man, that was good. I feel much better."
Yeah. Yep.
So,
That's why I got.
right
That's
person.
why I got to look for it. That's
Yeah.
why I got to get into it. Room 13.
Yeah. Yeah, Room 13, like, this is to me like side 2 of Damage. It goes into the pit of despair. Like, that's like, for me, this record, like, the first side, I love it. Don't get me wrong. You got some of the anthems on there and whatnot. Rise Above, TV Party, Six Pack, Thirsty Miserable, Gimme, Police Story. But this is like side 2 of Funhouse, where it just devolves into
Right.
like fucking head trips. It's all mental case stuff. Room 13 being the room that Dukowski, I think, was confined into after like bad acid trips or something like that, and dealing with being locked into a mental hospital. Dude, yeah, it's some heavy shit.
Yeah.
That this side of the record for me has always been like, this is like the heavy stuff. It's
Right.
yeah.
This is a different
LA
feeling.
Blues. It's LA Blues off of Funhouse. That
Right.
like, yeah.
The wheels are coming off at this
The
point.
wheels are coming off, and I love it. I'm like, just give me more, give me more.
Right. Is this technically the break? I don't have a vinyl copy of this. This is the beginning of the second side.
Depression starts the second side.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
So
it's this is
It's fitting. You go from Depression into Room 13 into Damage 2, which is the faster version of Damage, which is still fantastic. But it's got that like 3 songs right in a row dealing with head issues. Like it's pretty heavy shit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then as you were just saying, Damage 2
Yep.
is the next song.
Yeah.
Funny that Damage 2 comes before Damaged 1.
It's because Damaged 1 is the perfect closer. It's
Yeah.
like, it's absolutely the song you need to close this record with. And they had worked up 2 different versions of this song. Damaged 1 was the original version, was the jam version, is the smoking weed and like doing some like Sabbath kind of like kind of stuff, their version of Sabbath kind of stuff, where Damage 2 is more of the speed version, even though it's not a speedy song. And there's Des Cadena vocal versions of both these songs. Neither one of them are remotely as good as what's on this record. The Rollins versions of the 2 Damage songs on this record are far superior to the Des ones.
Yeah.
And Damage 2, the version that they do with Des, is actually even faster than this one on here, and I don't care for it at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking over the song names right now, and I'm now that you've kind of put that into a different perspective for me, I'm just like, yeah, you got Depression, Room 13, Damage 2, No More, Padded Cell, Life of Pain, and then Damaged 1. I was just like, yeah,
Exactly, dude.
just titles alone, it just sounds like it's ready
There you
to
go.
beat you over the head.
Yeah, you're just like, holy shit. And like that's why this album really really spoke to me. Was the first side is like the party side, and the second side is like, okay, we're gonna take you down some serious shit, and that's that I just love it. I
Yeah.
just love it. Yeah.
Right. Now, you said Damaged 1 is the perfect closer. I was figuring maybe we could just skip over to that one.
Yeah, because the other songs I love. No More is a really great Dukowski song. Padded Cell, Life of Pain are really great as well. But They, I don't want to say that they don't stick out as much, but they don't. They don't. For me, they're like the really good songs. They're perfect at their length, and they say really really great things. But it's damaged one. Like to me, that's like
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, yeah. It's one of my favorite closing songs on any record. Period. You know, this
Really?
is like "Sad Lady of the Lowlands." It's like that's how deep this song is to me. It's like this is like you know Desolation Row. It's perfect.
Right.
It's a perfect closer to an album.
Yeah, and it's I mean obviously it seems like it's pretty I don't know introspective and kind of depressing.
Yeah,
Just like kind of looking over the lyrics quickly. Just kind of starts off with him saying, "Hi, my name's Henry, and you're
and
here
you're
with me
with me
now. My
now.
life, it's a song. You won't even let it happen. You won't let damage by attack. I'm even attacking my mind."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The thing that I love about this song is the chordal structure, the bang jang 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 jang, and it's all very dissonant, and I think it's like a seventh or something like that on there, but it's not something that you would hear a hardcore band do. Like especially at this time where you're talking about like Minor Threat and it's all bar chords, and some of their other contemporaries. Um, you know, uh, they just people didn't do this kind of stuff in hardcore, so to have this like band this really slow sludgy, this is like Melvin's, it's a slow sludgy. I believe Rollins's lyrics on this were all improvised, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that they're improvised.
Hmm.
And at least I know when they played it live before they recorded it, he just went for it. At least that's what he wrote about
Oh,
in
right.
his diaries.
Yeah.
And Get in the Van was it was just a jam, and he
Right.
just made it up on the spot. And I believe that it carries over to some degree with this. Um, I loved this song so much. Again, it's like L.A. Blues off of Funhouse for me. It has so much dissonance, so much sludge, so much pain and screaming, and that actually nicked like a cadence that Rollins does at the end of this. Oh yes, yes sir, yes sir. I nicked it for a Kilgore song that we did called X on our Search for Reason album in '98. And I didn't even realize that I had actually done it until I listened to the playback and I went, oh shit. Like I totally like nicked like damaged one, and they're like, dude, don't change that. That's fantastic. So
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's
That's
how much this record influenced me. When it was huge for me. Huge.
yeah. That's great, man. And when we first kind of like were messaging about doing the show, and I asked you what your favorite record was, your first was Funhouse. Just to
Yeah.
be clear, and I'm sorry that we couldn't do
No,
that.
it's fine. It's fine.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but kind of maybe quick synopsis of like Funhouse for you. Like,
Yeah.
what is it to what was that like your first experience?
I heard that record when I was 11 years old.
That's crazy.
Isn't that
And you
crazy?
liked it at 11?
No,
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
understand it. Like
Right.
it was my buddy bought it on cassette, and literally the only reason he bought the cassette was because it was called The Stooges, and we were huge Three Stooges fans. We would literally like tape the Three Stooges off of channel 56, and we put them on like VHS, and we just watch them. We would just watch them over and over and over again.
Right.
So we'd hang out and have these sleepovers and just watch the Three Stooges and talk about skateboarding or whatever. But he bought the cassette, and we were like just we didn't know who Iggy Pop was. We didn't know anything. We just got the cassette. He put it on. We were like, what is this? Because we didn't know like heavy music or anything like that, but it wasn't exactly heavy, but it is really heavy. So we just couldn't figure it out. And it became one of these things where because we couldn't figure it out, but there was something there, we just kept listening to it. He made me
Yeah.
a copy, he dubbed a copy for me on cassette. And, I took it home, and I found that I put this album on as much as I did with Revolver, because at that time I was like full blown like huge Beatles head. That's all I listened to. But I
Hmm.
would put on this record, and I just kept listening to it over and over again. And I was like, I don't know what it is about this record, but I really like this.
Yeah.
and that really kind of started us down this road with skateboarding and like everything else.
And punk
But it
rock.
was with punk rock, and we didn't even realize that this was that Funhouse was really the predecessor of punk rock, because again, you didn't have Wikipedia, and nobody covered that kind of music back then. It was
Mm.
all kind of word of mouth. And I didn't know, like, literally anybody that knew that album until probably I met Brian Tracy at LaSalle, and we ended up going in a band together, and he knew that record. But that would have been like 1989, so it was years before I knew anybody else that knew that record.
Yeah.
It was like, dude, you know that record? It became one of those kind of like I don't want to say a rite of passage, but if you knew somebody that knew that record and they
Yeah.
liked that record, you were like instant buddies.
Right.
It was like Scott Patterson, who was in a band called Skinned Alive, and a few others in Providence. He introduced me to Jesus Lizard and the Melvins, and that would have been like 1990. But we went over to his house to smoke some weed, and we brought some records, and we put on Funhouse, and he was like, "Dude, you like this record?" So it was like we were buddies immediately. So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it's like if you knew people that liked Funhouse, you were instantly in the tribe, kind of a thing. But
Mm.
it's everything about it. Like, I love Scott Ashton's drumming. I love his drumming.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was just so in the pocket and perfect. Scott Ashton's guitar playing is like pristine. It's perfect.
Right.
And Iggy's singing on this. He's doing more of the down on the street where the faces shine. He's doing that lower register, and not like the Search and Destroy, the higher register stuff that he does on Rob Howard. I was never, to this day, I like Rob Howard. Don't get me wrong. I'm never going to disrespect Rob Howard. It's a fantastic record. But if I'm going to listen to Iggy Pop, any Iggy Pop, I'm putting on Funhouse, period. Because I love his singing on it. I love the guttural cries. I love every one of those songs. Every single song on that is
Right.
perfect. Like Dirt, the opening drum roll, boom, ga, ga, boom, boom, ga.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, everything about it. Like, I love every single note of that record.
Hmm.
It's
No,
perfect.
I'm hear you,
perfect.
man. I agree with you. It's a perfect record.
Yeah.
Perfect rock record.
It's, for me, like, I try to list them in order, and the order always changes. But like Exile on Main Street, Funhouse, and It Takes a Nation of Millions, they're always like right there in my top three, like somewhere in that rotation. Um, the day I got my first iPod, Exile on Main Street and It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back and Funhouse were on there. And if you open up my iPhone right now, they're on there. Like, they will, they follow me everywhere I go. Like,
Yeah.
every tour that I've ever been on, like, I always had a copy of Funhouse, Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, and Exile on Main Street. Those records follow me until my day I'm gone.
Cool, man. Yeah. Well, that's a good collection to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple more things just before we,
Yeah.
we wrap it up.
Sure, man.
So I forgot to ask you, like, so in the whole quarantine thing now that we're living in, so what have you been doing these days?
It's really archiving. I, like I said, I stopped playing live shows about a year ago, and I lost the passion for it. I don't know if you saw it, but like the last show that we played, there's some video clips up on our page on the Orphans. We played at the News Cafe in Pawtucket and whatnot. And I had never watched them, and I watched them recently, and I was like, yeah, I don't look like I'm into it. It doesn't look like I usually, every time that I play, I usually play with some passion. And even especially with the Orphans, it would be, just sweat flying everywhere and intensity, and there's none of that there. And I just burned out, and I was like, I need to take a break. I've been leading my own band for the last 20 years in some way, shape, or form, where I was writing all the songs, recording everything, booking all the shows, booking practices, promoting the shows, recording it, like, everything. And I just was like, I just need to take a break.
Yeah. Well, are you
Stop.
taking a break or are you done?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I don't miss playing with other people right now, and that's a horrible, horrible place to be.
Hmm.
The guys in Kilgore asked me about last summer. They're like, "Hey, let's do some shows," and I was like, I can't. I'm not there. I don't even want to play the Orphans, and that's my band. That's my music. That's everything is well crafted. And they're like, shit, that's a really bad place to be, man.
Hmm.
We wish you the best. Hopefully you turn around.
Right.
So I'm really just kind of taking time off. Enjoying other things in my life, but I've got so much archival stuff. Stuff that never got finished. There was a band that I did called the Blood Riders in 2016, and it was a really, really, really good band. It was basically the guys from a local band called Canerco that they asked me to do some different songs with them, and I sang with them. So it was the band Canerco and Al not singing for them and me singing with them, different kind of songs. Really, really heavy, really, really cool, bluesy, Les Paul through a Marshall kind of stuff, like really, really great. And we recorded all these songs, and I never did the vocals because I got sidetracked with Kilgore, and I got sidetracked with the Orphans, and I used to travel a lot for my job, so there was only so many hours in the day. So I'm going back and doing all the vocals for that and putting it out. We recorded the Blood Witch album, which was a really, really great metal band that I did in 2007. We recorded that album in 2011, but we broke up, so there was no need to put out the record, So I just put it out a few months ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Where is it? I couldn't find it.
It's up on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes.
Oh, okay.
Ton of places.
I'll have to look it up again. I couldn't find anything basically. I mean, I was looking up the Brimstone Assembly and Revival Preachers, and
that's basically where I'm at right now. I have my own domain for jberndt.com, and there's nothing there. So I'm like, you know what? Let me put together a website that is all my stuff. So there's a kind of one-stop shop place, because I've done a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that I'm really proud of. And there's no real place to find any of this stuff. So the Preachers records, there's 3 or 4. They're all going to be up on, probably by the end of the year. They'll all be up in streaming services everywhere. The Brimstone stuff, same thing. I've got like 3 records for that stuff that'll be up. The Blood Riders stuff, that'll be up. There's a ton of Kilgore stuff. Our demos from 93, our demos from 94, they're not available anywhere. That's going to be up. We did a live album in 2007, our first reunion, never released it, so there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff.
Cool.
So enough to keep me busy for a while.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that you're working on it, and that stuff will finally see the light of day, at least for people that, have heard about it and want to be able to listen to it somehow.
That's the thing, is I keep getting, through the internet, like people reach out and be like, dude, Blue Collar Solitude, our album from 1995 with Kilgore, you can't get it anywhere. It doesn't exist, and it's all, it's all tied up in, major record label mumbo jumbo, because it's not a record label anymore. It's owned by Warner Brothers, but they don't see any reason to put it out. We've reached out to them and asked them, and it's like, without legal representation, they don't even want to talk to you. So we're literally contemplating, maybe we'll record the album again, because we can do that. Let's just record it. Call it, Blue Collar Solitude Revisited. We know those songs like the back of our hands. Let's just record it. We'll put it out. We can stream it, have it up there so people can hear it. So,
interesting. Yeah. So not even if you found the CD, you must have a copy somewhere.
Oh sure, yeah. But we can't put it up. It'd be copyright violation.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah. We own the publishing, so we own the rights to the songs, but that actual recording, like the actual property of that, if I rip that and try to put it up on Spotify, they'll take it down.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know you don't want to play that game.
No. I got a decent job. I make a decent living. I enjoy what I do and everything like that, but I don't need to be hiring lawyers for some of that kind of bullshit, So,
yeah, you might as well just wait it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the last thing, your last solo records, Sad Bastard Songs, and Jay Berndt sings Waylon for Jessica, right?
Jessica, yeah.
That's cute. You made it specifically for your wife.
It was the real story was I made it as a Christmas gift for her,
right?
Because the Preachers and Brimstone played Waylon songs, And every time we would play, she back then she used to come to all of our shows, like all the shows. So we'd play a show, and she was like, "That song, that third song that you played, I love that. What is that?" And it was always, "That was Waylon Jennings." That was, yeah. So that sixth song that you played, I love that song. What is it? It's Waylon Jennings. Really? And she'd always ask. She was like, "Why haven't you recorded any of those songs?" I'm like, "Well, we have original songs, so we're not going to record a lot of covers. We'll just focus on our original songs. You should do something with that." So, one Christmas, around the fall or something like that, I just had the idea. I was like, you know what? I'll just play some of her favorite Waylon songs, and I'll play all the instruments, and I'll give it to her for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. She loved it, and at that time, Rusty Knuckles had approached me because they had seen the owner of the label. His name is Ralph Miller. Great, great guy. He actually saw us play in California with Kilgore like a few times, and he was a big Kilgore fan. And he was like, "I wonder what that guy's doing." And he found the Revival Preachers online back in the MySpace days, and he was like, "So you're still doing the Preachers?" I said, "No." And he was like, "So what are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on a solo album." And he was like, "Well, what is it going to sound like?" So I sent him like the CD that I gave to Jessica for Christmas. And he was like, "Dude, we have to release this. This is fantastic." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not going to have my first solo album be a Waylon Jennings tribute album." He was like, "You should." And I'm like, "No, no, no." I'm like, "Let me do my solo album first, and maybe we'll put that out." So that's what happened. We put out Sad Bastard Songs. I was proud of it, still am to this day, and warts and all. And then I basically got out the old tapes for the Waylon album, and I had Damien come in and play some of the leads on the record, because I was like, "My leads are not good enough, dude. Come down and do these." He was like, "Yeah, man, no problem." So he came down, he did the leads on the songs, and that was the record.
Cool. So what's your relationship with Rusty Knuckles like? Because that's actually how I found you, because I
Yeah.
was doing some research and Rusty Knuckles came up. I was just like, oh, he's on this label.
Yeah, it basically is, Ralph is great. He, we did everything without like a contract or anything like that. It was all just on a handshake. "I'll do this for you, and I'll give you this cut." And I was like, "Cool, awesome." And he never said, "I don't want you to do this song." It wasn't like any of the Warner Brothers bullshit that I dealt with in the past. Warner Brothers, any major label like that, it's basically a bank. And they want to see return on their investment. They're taking a high risk on signing any young band in their 20s,
Right.
and trying to put them on tour and and mature the band. So we would get like, "Hey, Green Day's really big right now. Maybe you guys should do a punk song." "Hey, I see that Korn just signed with Adidas, and they're getting like tracksuits and stuff like that. We know people at Puma. Maybe you should get some Puma."
Right.
"Yeah, do you know who we are? Like, like we're not that, Hey, Rammstein and Marilyn Manson and, Nine Inch Nails are big right now. I mean, maybe we should do some industrial mixes of your stuff." Constantly. It was all the time. We would get that stuff all the time.
Right.
And it wore me down. So I never really wanted to deal with a record label ever again. But Ralph was like, "Dude, you do your own artwork, you do what you want to do, and we'll just
Right.
get it distributed for you." And that was it.
Crazy.
That was it.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. I mean, like everyone has a story like that. I think anyone that's been on
absolutely.
any major label, but that just sounds
Even big bands. Seriously, man. Like, I guarantee the dudes in Nirvana have those stories of the record label wanting to change something about them. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. It's just the way.
well. I'm glad to hear that you're working on the archive at least, because obviously there's enough to work on. So
It sure is.
I'm looking forward to getting that stuff available finally, so we can all get to listen to it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So aside from the archive, is there anything else that you're promoting or you're working on right now that like people should know about?
No, just the website. I'll have something up fairly soon. It's going to be a combination of basically an archival website of all the bands, so you can click on each of the bands and get a glimpse, get a the story, and kind of my version of the story. I really wanted to, so many people write websites that they've done themselves, but they write it in the third person, like Jay did this and Jay did that, And I'm like, no, I'd rather write it like I was telling a story, like you and I are talking right now.
Right.
So So my idea is to really kind of do like an archival website to talk about my personal experiences with each of these bands and what the project was like, and you know, have links to videos there and links to, you know, the music and whatnot. So it's all kind of in one place, because, you know, we just listed off, like, you know, a few bands that I've done. There's a
Right.
lot more, you know.
Right.
So like it'd be cool to have like a one-stop shop. But I also have ramblings about, like, you know, my favorite top 100 albums. Cool, I should do a blog, you know,
Mm.
and I've just never gotten around to it. Or like these tour stories that I have, or, you know, there's tons of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So part of the website will also have a blog section that, you know, will be, you know, all these musings and stories, and, you know, the hate mail that I got from the last Kilgore record, because there's lots of heavy metal Trump supporters out there apparently.
Wow.
Whatever.
Yeah. Fuck those
Hate mail,
guys.
like, just crazy, like, you know, just crazy. You know?
Yeah.
And I responded to every single one of them. You know, try and like talk some sense into them, and it was just it was
It's like
taxing.
talking to a
taxing.
wall. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was very taxing.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, it's okay.
Hey, well,
Somebody
Jay,
got to do it.
yeah, Jay. Hey, I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really
great talking
appreciate
to you.
you hanging out and talking some music with me.
You got it, man. Anytime you wanted to, you know, hey, let's talk about another record. I'm more than happy to. Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
Anytime.
Sure,
Yeah, man.
sounds
You got
great. All right, well, thanks, Jay. Appreciate
it. My
it.
pleasure, dude. It's great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Good night.
See you later.
Vinyl and Vision is a Psychic Static production. Theme song written and performed by Jeff Robbins of 123 Astronaut.